I grew up in a place called Brisbane. Back then, people liked to call it a big country town. To be honest, probably was. Over time, I've seen it go through many changes, some for the better. But watching that place turn from a town into a city, well, that also comes with a few chapters of sadness and disappointment. We've lost too much of our history and our heritage. Too many of our landmarks have all of a sudden disappeared in the landscape. More importantly though, those landmarks fostered a spirit and pride in its people. Now, looking back on the Brisbane that once was, I can't help but think that we've lost something we once held very dear. Cloudland. I heard so many stories about the legend of Cloudland's dance hall days. A grand old stage, sprung floor, boy meets girl, endless memories. But I knew it in a different sense. Long before Triple J, Triple Z was Brisbane's only alternative music station, and Cloudland played host to the local independent music scene. Even in its rundown state, it had to be a treasure worth preserving. Cloudland, it deserved the chance of a future in this city. Festival Hall. First came onto my radar as a boxing venue. Well, I was too young to go, of course, but my dad would tell me about the stories of the nights at the fights when people would throw coins into the ring for a winning boxer they thought deserved a little bit extra. And what about the concerts? So many great live acts over the years. There was true theatre. The energy, the emotion, the colour. And more than that, it was a snapshot of Brisbane's personality. You know, my mum saw the Beatles there back in 1964. I saw so many wonderful bands as well. Had so much character. You could almost smell it. You know, for all the memorable acts that were billed as coming soon, there were just as many that we never saw. They won't be coming. It's gone. And that's a little bit sad. At the very least, I think we'll regret the passing of Festival Hall for that reason. The Paddington tram depot mysteriously burnt down in the middle of the night to make way for the buses. And the Bellevue Hotel, one of this country's oldest buildings, demolished in the early hours of the morning while we were sleeping. We're about to lose another piece of our history, the Regent. I'm standing outside it now on the day that cinema doors were officially closed. We'll have photographs, memories, stories handed down. They call it progress. It's bloody criminal if you ask me. And just to rub it in, a facade by its very definition, a permanent and pretentious reminder of our loss. You know, the sad thing about it is that once it's gone, we're not going to get it back. What about some of the other places and people that have gone? The ones that we've forgotten? How many of us remember a place called the Paris Cafe, or a poet known as the Brisbane Bard? Well, I'm not the Brisbane Bard, but I can tell you this story certainly is a very personal one for me, and I'm determined to get to the bottom of it.
Yeah, I used to stand right there, apparently, just up from the Shingle Inn. Now, I'm told in the late 50s it was the place to be, sort of like the heart and soul of the Brisbane social scene. But, well, it was knocked down long before I was born. Now, I don't know too much about the Paris. It wasn't really spoken about all that much in my family. We've got the odd photograph, stories handed around. Sometimes the fact gets tangled up with the fiction. I can say this, though. It's gone now, like another Brisbane landmark lost in time, only, well, it's more sadly missed by my family.
the Paris was such a real cool spot.
It was so beautiful, it was so romantic. The music, the beautiful ballroom. It really was, it was gorgeous. And all those young couples out having fun, some looking for love. They were lucky.
Of course, other people would remember it different to me.
So you didn't know about the nights at the Paris?
Yes. Of course I knew. We were open every Friday and Saturday nights.
We had the 6 o'clock swill in Brisbane in those days, no alcohol after 6 o'clock at night. But I think something used to go wrong with that law about the Paris because the coffee seemed to be a bit strong at times.
You just found a way to get around it?
Well, they tell me you'd go and ask for a cup of cough mixture. It was, I think it was the black coffee with a good dose of Bundy rum shoved into it, but I'm not saying that happened. But
Well, you never told me that.
It wasn't any secret. I only worked the odd nights, and only if I had to. The other girls there, they told me it was fun at the nights, but I never found it in my experience. I was stuck working days. Cups of tea, beans on toast.
You know, the licensing laws just created such a position where, you know, certain places that couldn't open late at night and couldn't put on live music.
But this was one.
This was one.
Oh, it wasn't bad music there, but it wasn't as good as Cloudland. Even if it wasn't a place to take your wife.
Yeah, it was crowded, but it was too crowded, and the wrong kinds of people came after a while.
Actually, I was a cadet journo at the Courier when it was less of a rag. They used to get me go out into the field looking for stories, mostly on quiet news days. We had a lot of them. That's when I came across Joylene, and who led me and put me on to the fact that someone was writing poetry at the Paris.
the first one he wrote was apparently on a linen serviette down at the Paris cafe. Old Peter owned the cafe. He might have been Greek, but he wasn't into modern classics. He changed his napkins that day from linen to paper. He said if people were going to scribble all over his napkins, they could write on paper, not his good linen. So
That sounds like him.
yeah, so, yeah. Apparently that was the first one I was ever found. When they were doing the cleaning up after everyone had gone home, found it on the floor.
I remember finding the first poem. I didn't really know what it was at the time. When I read it and realised what it was, you know, I always thought poetry was a bit of a wank, but this, it was really beautiful, just beautiful.
It wasn't so much just the words that he wrote. It was how he saw Brisbane. And he saw it differently to anyone else.
The longer the Bard remained anonymous, it just created so much interest, but not just here, it was right around the country.
That really made a real different situation then, when those poems started turning up. You know, people just kind of didn't like our music anymore.
His poetry just started to appear in different places around about. Became very popular. Even got printed in the local Courier Mail.
You know, we placed excerpts of his poems in the paper for weeks. And of course, asking him to come forward so that he could sign the release and get his cheque. But he never did.
And then from then on, his poetry sort of just cropped up everywhere in different places.
And would spread around town.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of people claiming to be him, and they're writing on matchboxes and coasters and things like that. But you could always pick his poetry. It had a different homeliness about it. The others, other poetry you could see was an imitation.
Yeah, plenty claimed to be the Brisbane Bard, but it was obvious they weren't.
All these wannabe poets kept coming in, writing poetry on all sorts of crap, on drink posters, cigarette packets. Some fool scribbled on a pair of ladies' underwear.
Really? What sort of undies were they?
Uncomfortable ones. The kind a foolish man would buy.
Must have been a short poem.
Not short enough, in my opinion.
No one knew who he was, but I had my suspicions.
Yeah, we tagged him. But he didn't look like what I expected.
Is that what they told you? No. No. I discovered the Bard. But I wish I hadn't. I just wanted to talk to him.
So, Don, tell us about the moment the identity of the Bard was uncovered.
Yeah, it wasn't a pretty moment.
They were just talking quietly and that, but I think she might have got a little bit excited and mentioned the word poetry, and people at the next table heard it. And then the whispering started. So they realised then who he was, so they started moving towards him, napkins and that.
He ran out of there like a frightened rabbit. And half the cafe went with him.
In retrospect, he must have thought we were a bloody lynch mob coming after him.
We just wanted to tell him how good his poems were. That's all.
Yeah, once he was discovered, he just went into seclusion. Never heard any more about him, never read any more of his poetry.
Sully worked for the paper all along. He would have just been happy enough selling papers. The problem was the Courier printed his picture. I told him not to. I knew that they wouldn't leave him alone. I knew they wouldn't leave him alone.
Things just went back to normal. Beans on toast and muddy coffee.
Sully, he gave up selling newspapers and kind of just disappeared.
I left journalism after that. Oh, yeah. And actually, I went to manage a strip club. And I tell you what, I thought that was a more noble profession than the one that I just come from.
I do have one consolation.
No way. Really?
I kept that poem.
That's it.
The first poem.
Really? Can't believe you still got it.
A city has many stories that don't make it into print or onto the screen. Stories that are passed along from person to person by word of mouth. Oral histories, if you like. Folklore. Some stories disappeared, never to be heard again. Others float on the breeze and are moulded by time, like Chinese whispers. If they live long enough, they become urban legend. Part fact,
part fiction, they remain part of a city's identity.